Have you ever wondered what happens inside the walls of orphanages after the lights go out? Not the smiling pictures you see in glossy brochures, not the carefully rehearsed stories told to donors, but the real truth, the whispers, the vanishing, the secrets no one dares to tell. Today I will take you into one such place, but I must warn you. Once you hear what really goes on, you can never unhear it. The rain was merciless that night, slapping the earth in sheets of water, drowning out even the sound of Daniel's footsteps as he trudged toward the tall black gates. He was only 10, but he had already learned that the world was not kind. His parents had died in a fire 6 months ago, and his relatives, too poor or too unwilling, had handed him over to St. Helena's orphanage. From afar, the orphanage looked like a castle, grand, towering, with its jagged rooftops stabbing into the stormy sky. But up close, Daniel saw the truth. The bricks were cracked. Ivy crept up the walls like veins. The windows were tall and narrow, their glass so foggy they looked blind. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, Daniel swore he saw a shadow move behind one of the top-floor windows, watching, waiting. The iron gates creaked open before he even touched them. He froze. Someone or something had been expecting him. "Move along, boy," a gravelly voice called. Jonas, the caretaker. He was a tall, lean man with shoulders bent as though carrying an invisible burden. His clothes were simple, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, always darting, always observing. "Inside," Jonas ordered. "Madame Clara doesn't like delays." Daniel stepped through the gates, clutching his small, battered suitcase. The gates slammed shut behind him with such force it felt like the sound would echo forever. He had no idea then, but that sound wasn't just a gate closing, it was a warning. Once you enter, there is no way out. The dormitory was a long hall with rows of rusted metal beds. Children of all ages lay curled under thin blankets, their faces pale and hollow-eyed. Some peeked at Daniel with curiosity, others turned away quickly, as if afraid even to look. Madame Clara entered then, her shoes clicking against the wooden floor. She was a woman of striking presence, tall, draped in a black gown. Her silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. Her smile was too wide, too rehearsed. "Welcome, Daniel," she said, in a voice that dripped with honey but carried something sharp underneath. "St. Helena's is your new home. We are family here." Family? Daniel wanted to believe her. But as she moved past him, he caught sight of the other children. Not one of them smiled back. That night, Daniel lay awake listening. The storm had passed, but the silence of the orphanage was worse. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind felt alive. Then he heard it. A faint sobbing. He sat up, his eyes scanning the beds. The sound came from the far corner, but when he strained to look, the bed was empty. No child, just a pillow soaked with tears. Before he could move, Jonas entered silently, carrying a lantern. He bent over the empty bed, picked up the pillow, and whispered something Daniel couldn't hear. Then he left, closing the door without a sound. The sobbing never came back. Morning came with the ringing of an old brass bell. Breakfast was porridge, tasteless and gray. The children ate in silence, heads down. Daniel tried to speak to the boy beside him, a thin child with sunken cheeks. "Hi, I'm Daniel," he whispered. The boy didn't respond. He just shook his head quickly, his eyes darting toward Madame Clara. Later that day, while sweeping the corridor as punishment for not eating fast enough, Daniel overheard 2 older girls whispering near the laundry room. "Did you hear it again last night?" one asked. "Yes," the other whispered. "The crying. And then..." She lowered her voice. "Another one is gone." The first girl gasped. "Shh, don't say it too loud. If Madame Clara hears..." The broom slipped from Daniel's hands. The sound echoed, and the girls scattered like frightened birds. Jonas appeared instantly, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Curiosity is dangerous here, boy," he warned. His voice was calm, but Daniel felt the threat beneath it. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His heart beat with fear and curiosity. He sat up and whispered to the boy in the bed beside his. "Where do they go? The children that disappear?" The boy stiffened. Slowly, he turned his head and whispered back, "They don't go anywhere." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" The boy's eyes were wide with terror. "They're still here, just not the same." It was 3 days later when Daniel made his first discovery. He had been assigned to clean under the dormitory beds. As he pushed aside dust and scraps of paper, his hand touched something solid, an old leather-bound book. His pulse quickened as he pulled it out. The diary was worn, its pages yellowed, the ink smudged. Inside, the handwriting was shaky, desperate. "If you're reading this, run. They take us at night. Madame Clara says it's for our good, but children never come back the same. They whisper about the offering. I don't know what it is. I only know I'm next." The entry ended abruptly. The last words trailed off, as if the writer had been pulled away mid-sentence. Daniel slammed the diary shut, his hands trembling. He looked around, every shadow seemed to lean closer. He stuffed the diary under his mattress, his mind racing. The offering? What did it mean? That night, as he lay awake clutching the diary to his chest, he heard it again. The sobbing, the whispers. Only this time he realized something terrifying. The whispers weren't coming from the hall. They were coming from inside the walls, and one word, repeated over and over. "Daniel! Daniel!" Daniel sat up, his breath caught in his throat. His name. They knew his name. He pressed his ear to the cold stone wall. The voices grew louder, like dozens of children trapped inside, their whispers blending into one chilling message. "They are watching you too." A chill ran down his spine. He stumbled back onto his bed, clutching the diary, his young face pale with terror. For the first time, Daniel realized the truth. St. Helena's wasn't a home. It was a cage, and he was already trapped inside its secret. The night at St. Helena's orphanage had grown heavier, darker. The storm outside had ended, yet inside the walls, an unease thicker than the rain still lingered. Daniel had not forgotten the whispers in the diary he found. The words still haunted him. "They are not gone. They are taken." He hadn't told anyone. He couldn't. He knew if Madame Clara or Jonas discovered the diary, he would vanish too. That night, as the oil lamp flickered weakly above the dormitory, Daniel noticed something chilling an empty bed. Not just any bed. It belonged to Samuel, a boy who had smiled at him just that morning. Samuel's small wooden toy horse still sat on the shelf above his bed, but Samuel himself was gone. The whispers were true. Over the next few days, more beds became empty. First Samuel, then Mercy, then 2 sisters whose names Daniel never learned. The matron, Madame Clara, explained it each time with the same cold words. They were adopted, fortunate children, chosen by families. But Daniel's instincts screamed otherwise. Adoption should have been a cause for joy, a farewell, a hug from friends. Instead, children disappeared silently in the night. No goodbyes, no letters, no families arriving. One evening, while helping Jonas carry supplies to the cellar, Daniel noticed something odd. On the caretaker's clipboard was a ledger of names. He glimpsed the first few lines before Jonas slammed it shut. But it was enough. Each vanished child had a mark beside their name, a mark shaped like a cross tilted sideways. The orphanage seemed to have 2 faces. In the daylight, it was quiet, orderly, almost normal. But at night, it came alive with shadows and whispers. One midnight, Daniel followed Jonas. The man carried a lantern and walked with a strange purpose through the silent corridors. Daniel's bare feet barely made a sound as he trailed behind, holding his breath whenever the flame flickered too close. Jonas stopped at a door Daniel had never noticed before, an old wooden frame hidden behind a broken cupboard in the laundry hall. Jonas pushed it aside effortlessly, revealing a stairwell descending into darkness. The boy's heart raced. He had to know. As Jonas disappeared below, Daniel crept after him, careful with each step. What he saw in the depths of that hidden chamber froze his blood. The air was damp, thick with mildew and something sharper, the metallic sting of blood. Torches lined the stone walls, their light casting twisted shadows. Daniel crouched behind a column, peering into the chamber. Children, at least 5 of them, their wrists bound by iron chains fixed to the wall. Their eyes were wide, their cheeks stained with tears. Samuel was among them. On a stone table in the center lay old objects, rusted surgical tools, empty syringes, and jars filled with strange liquids that glowed faintly in the torchlight. Above the table hung a symbol carved into the wall, the same tilted cross Daniel had seen in the ledger. Madame Clara entered, her gown sweeping across the floor like a shadow. Her face was lit with a sickening smile. "They are pure," she whispered, her voice trembling with a hunger that did not sound human. "They will feed the promise." Jonas bowed slightly. "Another one tomorrow night?" Clara's eyes gleamed. "Yes, the boy who asks too many questions." "Daniel." Daniel's stomach dropped. They knew. He stumbled backward, his foot hitting a loose stone. The sound echoed sharply in the chamber. Jonas snapped his head up. "Who's there?" Torches flared as the caretaker grabbed one and charged toward the stairwell. Daniel ran bare feet, slapping against the cold stone, lungs burning. He reached the top of the stairs just as Jonas's lantern swung upward, casting his shadow onto the wall. He shoved the cupboard back in place, dived into a corner and pressed himself flat against the wall. Jonas's footsteps grew louder, closer. Then silence. The caretaker stood inches away, lantern light sweeping across the hallway. Daniel held his breath, heart hammering so loudly he was sure it betrayed him. Finally, Jonas muttered something under his breath and returned downstairs. Daniel didn't move until he heard the hidden door slam shut. He had escaped, but only barely. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The diary's words played over and over in his head. Not adopted. Taken. He looked around the dormitory. The children slept restlessly, twitching in their dreams. How many of them knew the truth? How many pretended not to notice so they could survive another day? The matron's morning prayers now sounded hollow, like chants meant to hide evil instead of praising good. Jonas's footsteps in the halls became the footsteps of a hunter, and the walls of the orphanage seemed alive with whispers. Unable to hold it in, Daniel whispered to one of the older girls, Ruth, in the laundry room. "I saw them," he confessed, his voice shaking. "The missing children. They're not gone. They're still here downstairs." Ruth's eyes widened in horror, then narrowed quickly. She grabbed his wrist. "Never say that again," she hissed. "They'll hear you. That's how children vanish." "Don't you care?" Daniel asked, desperate. Her hand trembled as she released him. "Of course I care. But caring gets you killed." She left him standing there, alone, her words ringing in his ears. Daniel realized then that silence was the weapon the orphanage used most. Fear kept everyone quiet. Fear made lies look like truth. But he couldn't be silent anymore. That night, Daniel opened the diary again. By the light of the flickering lamp, he wrote his own words on the last blank page. "If I vanish, let this book tell the truth. They are not adopted. They are stolen. Tonight I will find the key to the chamber. Tonight I will end this." He hid the diary back under the floorboard, pressed his small hand against it and whispered a prayer. The orphanage had grown colder. The once familiar creaks of the wooden floorboards were replaced by a heavy silence, as though the building itself was holding its breath. The storm that had raged and passed had passed, but the aftermath was no less unsettling. The skies hung low with gray clouds and the air was thick with dread. Daniel sat by his bed, knees drawn to his chest. Sleep was impossible. He could still hear Ruth's frightened whispers, and the image of the chained children below ground tormented him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces, pale, sunken, hopeless. And then there was the sound, the faint hum, a low, rhythmic chanting that seemed to rise through the floorboards, carrying with it a vibration that made his heart race. Tonight would not be like the others. Tonight felt different. Tonight felt final. By midnight, the orphanage stirred with the quiet shuffle of feet. Daniel feigned sleep as the dormitory door opened. Madame Clara's shadow stretched long across the floor, her silhouette sharp and severe. Behind her was Jonas, holding a lantern. His light swept across the sleeping children until it stopped on Ruth. Daniel's breath caught. He wanted to scream, to leap from his bed and stop them. But Ruth's wide eyes met his in the dark, silently pleading, "Don't." In a moment, she was gone, led away into the depths below. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. The whispering in his head was deafening now. He knew with terrifying clarity that if he didn't act tonight, Ruth and the others would be lost forever. Daniel slipped from his bed, the wooden planks cold under his bare feet. He crept through the hallways, avoiding every pool of light. His hands trembled as he moved the cupboard aside and pried open the hidden door. The stairwell yawned before him like the throat of some ancient beast. Step by step he descended. The air grew colder, heavier. The chanting grew louder, layered with voices not entirely human. His candle flickered violently, as if resisting the pull of the darkness. And then, he saw it. The chamber was alive with firelight and shadow. Torches lined the walls, but their flames burned an unnatural blue. Symbols, those same crooked crosses, glowed faintly on the stone, as if pulsing with life. At the center, the stone table gleamed under the light of a ritual circle drawn in ash and blood. Children were chained in a semicircle around it, their heads bowed in forced submission. Ruth was there, tears glistening on her cheeks. Madame Clara stood tall in ceremonial robes, her hands raised. Jonas knelt beside her, his face slack, his eyes glazed as if under some spell. And then Clara spoke, her voice low and commanding. "The time has come. The harvest is ripe. Through their innocence we are made strong." Daniel pressed himself against the stone wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. But the moment was fragile. His candle gave a betraying sputter, a sudden flare of light. Jonas's head snapped toward him, his eyes narrowed. "Boy," his voice thundered, echoing through the chamber. The chanting stopped. All eyes turned. Madame Clara's thin lips curled into a smile. "Well, well," she said slowly. "Our curious little guest has finally come." Hands seized Daniel's arms before he could run. He kicked, thrashed, bit, but Jonas was too strong. He dragged Daniel toward the altar as Clara spread her arms wider, chanting again. The symbols on the wall flared with brilliance, and the chained children cried out in terror. Daniel was forced down onto the cold stone table, his small frame pinned. He screamed Ruth's name, but his voice was drowned in the roar of the ritual. Clara's hand hovered over his chest, a black dagger in her grip. "Through this vessel," she declared, "we claim eternal strength." And then light. It began faintly, like the flicker of dawn. But it grew, expanding with unstoppable force, until it filled the chamber with brilliance no darkness could withstand. The walls trembled, the blue flames extinguished, replaced with a blinding white fire that consumed the symbols. Madame Clara shrieked, stumbling backward, the dagger clattering from her hands. Jonas cried out, covering his eyes, and then they appeared. Figures robed in radiant light, their wings unfurling like banners of fire. Angels. Their presence was overwhelming, pure, and fierce. One raised a hand, and the chains around the children shattered like glass. Another touched the stone altar, and it cracked in two, splitting with a sound like thunder. Daniel felt warmth flood his body, his fear dissolving into peace. He was lifted from the altar by unseen hands and placed gently among the freed children. The chanting had turned to screams, Clara's and Jonas's voices breaking under the weight of a power far greater than their own. "Leave this place," a voice thundered. Not human, not earthly, but divine. Your time has ended. The chamber shook violently. Stones fell from the ceiling, the ritual circle burning away into nothing. Clara clawed at the ground, her face twisted in rage and terror. "This is my covenant," she screeched, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of collapsing stone. Jonas tried to flee, but a wave of light swept through him, and he crumpled like ash in the wind. And then Clara was gone, engulfed in the fire of judgment. The chamber fell silent. The light dimmed but did not vanish, settling into a calm glow that filled the space with peace. When Daniel awoke, he was back in the dormitory. The morning sun streamed through the cracked windows, warm and golden. For the first time, the air felt clean. The children gathered around him, their faces weary but free. Ruth clutched his hand tightly, whispering, "We're safe." The orphanage itself had changed. The corridors no longer groaned with menace. The shadows were just shadows now, nothing more. The hidden door was gone, sealed by light. Madame Clara and Jonas were never seen again. Some say they perished in the collapse. Others whispered that judgment had claimed them entirely. Daniel knew the truth. They had been unmasked and destroyed by the hand of God. As the sun rose higher, the children stood together in the courtyard holding hands. For the first time, laughter echoed through the old stone walls. And yet, Daniel could not shake the thought that lingered like a shadow in his heart. He looked at the horizon, his voice low, almost trembling. If God had not intervened, how many more children would still be trapped? And how many orphanages still keep secrets hidden in plain sight? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you never miss a single story.